Next on this stage, we are going to hear from some of the country's most dedicated and most influential actors in the startup ecosystem. They have been instrumental in many ways in the improvements made for both founders and startup growth in general in Austria. They are fabulous, and of course, I'll introduce them first because they're the stars of the show. Lisa Fassl and Oliver Holle, come on stage. And of course, they will be talking with the two irreplaceable hosts of the Future Weekly podcast. Put your hands together for our executive chairman, Markus and his controversial counterpart, the fabulous Daniel Cronin. Woo!
You all good? Okay. So on a scale from 1 to 10, and 10 is like the most amazing audience ever, I'll give you a 10, and the rest of you I'll give like a 3-ish. Yeah, get a 10 as well. So let's do this again. You all good? Now I'm happy. Now I feel like at home. That's awesome. You good too?
Absolutely.
Totally. I mean, the controversial counterpart, and Markus, and Oliver. I mean, what can go wrong, right?
No, nothing much. So first of all, it's so good to have you here. Markus, we are recording, right?
That's a good point. Are we recording? Guys, please tell me how I put the recording on. In the meantime, we can already start.
Yeah, first of all, we need to do explaining, because some of you, who knows the Future Weekly podcast, raise your hand. Ooh. That's awesome.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I know it as well, right, yeah. That's awesome. So normal machen wir das ja auf Deutsch. Aber wir haben uns ja gesagt, weil internationales Publikum, we'll do this in English today. So it'll be confusing. We're doing it live, but we thought we need to use that occasion. So this is really, really good. And you are our barometer. So if something's funny, you can laugh, and if something's crap, you just pretend it was awesome. So that's going to be great. And Markus, I mean, it's been 10 years since we've been doing this. Not the podcast, but Austrian Startups. And what better place than to have our podcast here, right?
Absolutely. And what better guests we could have for that?
I mean, the guests are awesome, right? Because, I mean, do I need to introduce them? No, we'll do it differently. Tell me who you are and what you do.
Okay, but first, before I talk about myself, huge congratulations to Austrian startups, because what you've been doing in the past 10 years, all the effort you put into the ecosystem, all the conversations you had with politicians, people in the ecosystem, investors, I mean, it's just amazing. I think without you, no one would be sitting here, and the ecosystem would not be as developed as it is today. So huge congrats to the two of you, the entire team, the founders. It's just, we're very thankful for you, seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now tell us what you do.
Okay, so you wanted to know who I am. That's a long story. So we're going to start in 1991. Okay, not as funny as expected, fine. So my name's Lisa, actually Lisa Marie, named after Lisa Marie Presley, which is just a fun fact. Please do not call me Lisa Marie, because it's just, I don't like it that much, unless I say something completely stupid. Then you can totally go with Lisa Marie.
Can I comment on that? That's the one question I prepared for you today. I wanted to know if your parents liked Elvis.
My mom did. Yeah, no, she really did.
That's a beautiful name.
Yeah, we could argue about this, but I think we have more interesting topics to discuss, I hope. If not, let us know. So these days, I spend most of my time working on a venture capital fund called Fund F. We launched the fund last year in October, and the fund is currently managing 12 million euros, and we're investing in gender-diverse founder teams across Europe. Why do we do this? Because we think, and we know, thanks to data, that gender-diverse founder teams perform way better. Still, they're being overlooked in the European tech ecosystem, because most investors are male, unfortunately. Some of them are also nice, but also men. And they have a slight bias towards investing in people that are similar to them. And this is what we want to change. So we really see this as a huge economic opportunity. We're also fundraising until the end of this year, just putting it out there for the fund itself, for the investors in the room. And besides that, Nina and Nina is here in the first row. we started an organization called Female Founders, and this is sort of the backbone of the fund, which has become the European market leader in the topic of female entrepreneurship. And we are based in Austria.
So good to have you here. Oliver, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, I love you guys too. Let's leave it there. Yeah, I'm Oliver. I co-founded Speed Invest 12 years ago. We're the guys with the money, right? That is.
I love that.
We know why we're laughing, because this was exactly the quote 12 years ago where we didn't have shit money. we pretended we have.
I have to explain, when I heard Oliver the first time, his pitch was basically saying, so we're Speed Invest and basically we have money. It was $5 million, I believe, right?
5 million, yeah. But back then in Vienna, that was more than anybody else.
It was awesome. And now just give it maybe 1 or 2 numbers about Speed Invest nowadays. How much do you have now?
So we just closed 2 funds in total with 500 million. Total assets under management is 1.2 billion, and we have roughly 300 portfolio companies in.
That's the moment where you say, fuck me. Can you name all 300, starting with A?
Of course not. But I don't have to anymore, you know. It comes with age.
I love it. Markus, that's a good...
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So we assembled you today because we'd like to kind of look back, look to now, and look forward, and try and understand a little bit past 10 years, and maybe also future 10 years. And it's just so interesting to reflect when we were sitting just over there backstage. Like when we started doing this kind of stuff, we'd meet like in a small co-working space called Sector 5. Anyone ever been to Sector 5? Raise your hand and say yes. Yeah, that's like 3% of you. So it was like an awesome co-working space. It was like the co-working space back in the day. We'd meet up, we'd know everyone on first name basis, and that's just a hell of a crowd. And that was like the way the fire started. Being here, seeing you, being on stage now, that's a bit of a different part. Markus, where do we start?
Well, let's start with where we are at now, because I think we are living through quite different times to the last few years. The tide has turned, liquidity has gone away, and the topic of today is the state of startups. So I want to know, how do you think the startup ecosystem in Austria has changed over the last 10 years, but also specifically over the last year? And how do startups have to adapt to that?
That's an easy opener, thank you.
Easy opener. Well, I mean, let's look at the positives, right? We have, by now, like even 3 years ago, I would have not thought that we would have like 2 unicorns and probably another 10 to 15 companies that are very, very credibly on its path to being at that stage, even in this environment. We have companies that are really doing well. We have more VCs coming from global perspectives to Vienna to go into these companies. We have a full range of VCs active that are raising, that are doing well, that have specific angles, like Fund F, like others. We're one of the bigger funds in Europe out of Vienna. So all in all, not that bad. I mean, I know we Austrians always tend to be grantig, but I guess we can also be proud what we have done, what this ecosystem has done. And it's, personally, I feel Austria, Vienna is very much on a rise, and it's actually, from a momentum perspective, I'd much rather be here than in other places in Europe. So I feel good about it.
I agree. So I think there's a lot of things that are going super well. Like the VC community is coming up, more funds out there. Austria has so much money, so there are still so many people out there that could actually invest in startups directly or in funds. So I think money is not a problem per se. I think we have amazing founders. I would wish to see more founders, to be honest, especially the ones coming out of university, because I think talent is something that we for sure have. I mean, we have some of the brightest minds in Europe and generally on the planet here, and I think our goal should be to make sure that they're staying here and that they can actually build great companies. And obviously also as I'm representing this topic of diversity and female entrepreneurship, so Vienna is the hub for female entrepreneurship in Europe. We have the highest rate of female co-founded startups. We have actually quite some female investors out there. So I think there's lots of pros actually, but the past year has been rough for a lot of companies. We see now lots of founders struggling to actually raise bigger rounds. Lots of worries out there, lots of uncertainty, and uncertainty is of course always the worst state that you can be in, because risk is something that you can manage, but uncertainty just sucks. And I think a lot of founders have been experiencing this roller coaster, as it always said in entrepreneurship, quite intensively in the past month. Like think about the Silicon Valley Bank drama and all the other activities that were happening. So I see lots of worries out there, but I'm very confident that good companies and great founders will find money and they will build amazing companies, no matter what the odds are.
Before we dive a bit deeper into this macroeconomic situation, I thought it's very interesting that you say you would rather be in Austria at the moment or in Vienna than in other countries. Why is that?
Well, startup, so to say, momentum comes really in waves, and there is if you look what happened in Berlin 5 to 10 years ago, or in London probably 15 years ago, you saw the first wave of scale-ups being built with super talented people on the top and super talented people below. That has happened in Vienna only very, very recently. So if you look at the current ecosystem in Vienna, you see a lot of spin-outs, you see a lot of super talented people, so to say, in the second rank, spinning out, doing their own things. And we have much more investments in London than we have anywhere else. I mean, the fight for talent, the war for talent in London is really tough. The price you have to pay for good people is crazy. And if you combine this kind of wave dynamics of these spin-outs in Austria with this much more, I would say, calm, much more retention-driven talent ecosystem, I think we have a really good shot to build lasting companies. And last not least, I don't know, at least what I always witnessed with Austrian founders, both male and female, we are used to have little money. Yeah, at least we all had no money. And that's a wonderful trait in this market environment. If you're used to grow up with raising a 10 million seed round and then a 40 million A round, and then it doesn't happen, you basically give up. Our country doesn't do that. Our people don't do that, and that will be very, very useful the next couple of years. So I'm really bullish. We have made more investments in Austria this year than the last 3 years combined. So it's going to happen. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just curious that I understand you a little better. Who of you is a founder? Raise your hand, just so that I get an idea. Okay, cool. Who of you has raised money? Okay, cool. Who needs money? Who has an opinion? No opinion. Who has an opinion? Humor? Active, interesting crowd to grip them. Okay, got it. Now I understand you a little bit better. Thank you very much. So you're painting quite a colorful picture of Austria, basically, when you're saying that a strength is that over a decade, a lot of startups here to live with little money, and you're saying quite practically, yes, funding was a little less, so people would bootstrap, would have all the other good parts there. So basically, bootstrapping is financing it out of their own pockets, which was always considered rather not a weakness, but a downside of being in Austria. Now you're saying it's a strength because we're used to it. Is that what you're saying? We're used to being poor.
I think the downside of Austrian founders was the lack of ambition and the lack of really dreaming big and thinking that they can build something that is dramatically bigger than anything else that has been built in Austria. And that has changed. We've seen it. We have companies, we have GoStudent, who is a global market leader in education. We have Bitpanda, who really is a European leader for crypto. We have a lot of other startups that are really global leaders in their niche. So it's happening. You can see it, you can touch it, you can talk to people. And if you, typically the next group, the next generation of founders have this ambition. Does this mean that they have to spend money like crazy? No. So ideally you can combine these two elements and then you really go somewhere. I mean, we have Travis here from TourRadar. He's the living example of somebody that's walked exactly through that cycle, including spending way too much money and now actually running a business that is not only growing dramatically but also profitable. So this is possible, and we just should aim a little higher and then it will work. Yeah.
I mean, you're just saying it, maybe just asking the two of you. I mean, currently when we have a podcast, usually currently week over week, we say tech company ABC1 has just gotten rid of 20% of their employees, 30%, 40%. We usually have a very clear explanation what the reason is, but the two of you are a lot smarter. So why is that currently happening? And maybe just that we can put it into context, because that seems to be the thing in the markets right now.
Which is probably one of the worst things that can happen to founders, because some of my friends are also like in the situation where they needed to let go of people, and something that's annoying me big times, to be very honest, because you said we can also be a bit critical, especially with society, is when then there's lots of newspapers writing about, we always knew it, startups are nuts, they're just wasting money, they're hiring people and then they're letting go and they are not human beings and they don't have any heart. And I think this is something that should change, because letting people go and having to go through this kind of downturn is probably one of the worst things that you can experience as a founder, because you are committed to your company and you are committed to those people. I mean, the past years have been crazy in terms of money. So there was lots of money. A lot of VCs were putting pressure on founders to also get the money out there, build teams, and probably, from my perspective, maybe a bit unpopular, but some of the teams were probably also overstuffed. And there were just too much money out there, too much money that needed to be spent, too many people hired that were probably also not necessary. But it was also great to be as big as possible and show that there is, some reasoning to the product and the company.
And I saw you shrug your shoulders slightly, going, yeah.
I mean, companies' number one job is at the moment to survive. So if you have a burn rate, if you burn too much money, you have to reduce costs. That's very, very simple math. And if you don't do it, you die. Very simple. So anybody who blames founders to do that is getting it completely wrong, I think.
But I'm curious, I mean, obviously, I don't know it now in detail, but I could imagine that both of you will have had these talks with founders you support in some form or function. I mean, that sucks, right? Having that talk and saying, look, if you don't downsize, you're going to die. How do you handle that from a mental aspect? Because, I mean, I know the numbers do the talking, but the heart does something else. And now both of you have big hearts. So how do you handle that? I'm thinking you have big hearts.
I mean, I've been there myself as a founder, and to be honest, there's a big difference who you let go. Honestly, I mean, it's not very popular to say this, but if you hire like 300 people within the course of 6 months, and then 2 months later you let go another like half of them again, it's one thing. Letting go of your co-founder, letting go of the people that are really, really close to you, that built this company with you, that sucks. And there's a big difference, and I think what happened in Austria and all over the world basically is calibration. It's a calibration exercise. We had way too much money thrown at these companies. They were exercising their growth experiments. They were seeing that they can't grow as fast as they wanted to with this kind of additional resources. So they had to calibrate. That's fine at the end of the day. We are living in a very, very privileged world where all of these people are getting new jobs very, very quickly. So I think there's a difference that we have to look into and that accept it. We are in the business of experiments, and experiments fail and need to be calibrated.
Do you think, the two of you, that people, because I have that theory that people who go to a startup, they know what they're getting themselves into. If you join like a company with 5 people and they have a pizza for you, you know, okay, this might be hard, this might be unpleasant. If you join a company with 300-400, a growth company, big building, all that cool stuff, you were the big consultant, you get paid maximum money. I have that, my gut feeling tells me that a lot of people weren't even aware what they were getting themselves into. What's your feeling about those types? Who were thinking they were going from one safe, well-paid job to another.
No, you go first. No. I think that's also, it depends on the person, right? Because if you do your research, and I think a lot of people do, and if you do research about the company and also about the startup ecosystem, and you are an adult human being, you make certain decisions, so you should be aware of the risk. But obviously, when you see the glamorous news about the company and everyone talking about it and investors throwing millions of euros on them, I think you don't expect that this is going to happen. Because let's face it, probably people who are working in startups are optimists. So they are, focusing on the growth of the company. They are seeing that it's going to grow, that at one point there's going to be an exit event, and at one point they may be also going to see some money coming out of this. So I think there's lots of hopes connected to startups, and obviously it's the worst thing when those are being broken and when they're not being fulfilled. But I think before joining a startup, you should be aware of the risk for sure, even if it's a company that has already scaled up, and you should do a double check.
we all lived for 12 years now in a fantasy world, including the investors. Everybody thought they have superpowers. Everything worked out. You always raise the next round, and you always succeed in what you do because things are growing. It's not the reality. It wasn't the reality for my team at Speed Invest. A lot of my younger investors never saw a downturn, never saw that their company is actually failing. So there's a lot of humbleness now starting to spread around, and that's a wonderful thing.
Is that going to create different founders?
I think, yeah. I mean, our experience now with female founders basically was building up the team starting in March 2020. So our first day at work, so literally Nina's and my first day at work, having 2 team members, was March 1st, 2020. 14 days after this, and we had quit our jobs at this point. So Nina used to work at Speed Invest, I used to work at the Austrian Angel Investors Association, and one of the first things we did, host one of the biggest events on the topic of female entrepreneurship with 700 in-person people in the first week of COVID. And for 2 weeks, we were basically not sleeping, sweating, because we were like, what if we're going to be headline on Corona-Zeitung next week because we're the next Corona cluster? Then we're basically fucked, right? And this is second week of our entrepreneurial journey. Then we told everyone, okay, let's go home. Corona is coming. And we basically went home to our childhood rooms and built this company out of there. So it's not the garage story, but it's basically being back with our parents. So I think we're the kind of founders that have experienced crisis mode, only crisis mode. And honestly, now having the second crisis sucks a lot, but it also helps a lot to build resilience, and to also build resilience, especially when it comes to fundraising. So I would say yes, based on my personal experience, it makes a very tough group of founders, and it really teaches you a lot of lessons that are important to really go the long run.
Talking about humbleness and the bubble that is bursting and a different environment now, mostly the advice is cut costs, increase runway, play defense. And then there are some people who say, when others play defense, you've got to play offense. Is that bullshit, or is there a truth to that?
I think you have to be 100% clear what game you want to play. There are many ways to be successful as a founder, even in our startup ecosystem. You can bootstrap, you can go organic, you can very carefully build your engine, your business, and then try to explode in a positive sense. Or you can go all in and then play the VC game, which is really, really a minority business. Yeah? The problem that I see is that a lot of founders are not clear. They're not clear what game they want to play. And they're dabbling around and want to have everything, all the best things from all pots, and that's not working. And that kind of education is where I feel Austria can still catch up to other ecosystems, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's also about aligning the investors, right? Because when you are going the funding route, no matter if that's the right choice for a company or not, you're going to talk to angel investors, you're going to talk to early stage VCs when you're raising your first round. And here it's also important to make sure that those people are aligned, because nothing worse, also from a co-investment perspective, if you're then there sitting with, let's go for example, with a business angel that has like a totally different perspective and that doesn't want to go like the super hyper growth route. That's obviously a problem for us as a fund, because our job as a fund is to make money and to return the money to our investors and hopefully make some profit.
I like the hopefully make some, I really do hope it works. That's an awesome pitch. I like that part. Now, I mean, what do we want to talk about? Just talking to you and seeing you and sitting here and reflecting about something, it's kind of a bit of a surreal experience, I have to admit, and thinking where we all started. When I look at you, I think like in the early days meeting you, when you were, what were you? You were lead Austrian startups, lead in... Styria. Holy shit, and you were like 12 or something, right, when you started off?
Right? Charming, I like you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, so Danny is like higher ranked now than you, Markus, I'm very sorry. Yeah, I mean, in my very brief preparations for this podcast today...
Thank you for humbling us so much.
Sorry, you wanted to have honest opinions, right? And
that's why I love you, yes, go for it.
We were at the office and I was trying to iron my shirt, which didn't work out, as I just heard. Thanks for the feedback, Maggie. And I was basically there at the office doing this, and then I was like reflecting on the past 10 years, because obviously the past 10 years have been interesting for the startup ecosystem and important, but also on a very personal level. And I was thinking about one of the very first meetups that I attended in Sector 5. I was thinking about what Nina was doing. I was thinking about what I was doing. And I was based in Syria, Graz. You know, this person studying business administration, so not 12, but a little bit older. And I started to deal with this topic of startups. And back then, I just had heard of this term, and then I was diving into the community, and then I heard about two guys. One was Hansi Hansmann, and the other one was Oliver Holle. And I was
The rock
just
stars,
the rock stars. The ones who
10 years
basically...
later.
No, seriously. And I was so much looking up to them, like seriously, because they were the ones who had so much influence, had the money, obviously, and they were part of all the super cool startup stories. And I was like, I want to meet them at one point. And now, sitting here on the stage with the two of you, and obviously Oliver, is just, I mean, a huge privilege. And I never would have imagined this. So on a personal level, I was like really proud to some extent as well, but also humble, and I'm just feeling like, okay, really, I'm a privileged person and I'm able to do some amazing things and really deploy money to founders who are building the next big thing, and that's just such a great position to be in. So I was very emotional a couple of minutes ago.
I love it. Thank you. And I mean, just saying that, I mean, if you and two other people wouldn't have had the crazy idea of after your big exit recycling the money, we'd not be here. Just to be honest, because I mean, that guy made a couple euros on something, and instead of, as people say, go off and buy an island and play golf or stuff, well, you went water skiing, apparently. But besides that, you were like, hey, let's do something really dumb. Let's reinvest into startups. And you did it with like 5 million. And initially, you were doing something, the greatest company ever in Austria, called The Merger. I always loved that. We were in the same office back then. There was always a post office guy coming along, a postman, and going, Entschuldigung, wo ist der Merger? You're like, the Merger? Merger ist da lang. That was The Merger, so that name didn't go too well. Then you moved.
The company, neither.
No. But I loved the Merger, always the guy looking for you. But it was like kind of you guys, initially, you started the fire, right? You were the ones who lit it, and there was that spark. And when I joined this ecosystem in 2010, for me, my gut feeling was there were like 30, 40 people in Spengergasse in an office just doing stuff. And the first meetup we had was essentially an after-work drink where we'd stand at the bar and go like, so what sucked this week? And that was starting this. Now being here, that's quite a crazy ride. And you joining back then, also my favorite Markus moment, as I have to admit, is when we hired you back then with Austrian Startups. Markus' third day at the office was an Austrian Startup Stammtisch like this, but the keynote speaker was none other than, at that point, the acting chancellor, Christian Kern. And Markus had to present in front of him on his third day in the office. Yeah, no pressure. And that's one of my personal favorite memories of doing that and seeing you do that and shitting myself talking to the chancellor. And now we're here. It's a crazy moment. Yeah.
I mean, I think. At the end of the day, these last 10 years were years of adapting expectations constantly upwards. And that's really important. And it was not us, it was really this crowd. It was Markus Wagner with i5. Yeah. You guys, of course. I mean, you were there from the very, very beginning. Nina was there from the very, very beginning. And now look at what happened. And so I think we all didn't believe that this is possible. I didn't believe that we would raise this amount of money. I wouldn't have believed that suddenly you're actually raising a female founders fund. Like there are like 3 funds in Europe that are doing this, and one of them are from Vienna. So it's fucking amazing.
But here's the thing, though. Yes. When you always say yes, here's the but. By the way, you also mentioned Markus Wagner. For me, joining the ecosystem, you guys were there, intangible. Markus Wagner was on a world tour traveling, and everyone was just speaking about der Markus. And he was like this non-existent mythical creature.
One way to do it.
Yeah. And it was just der Markus. And it was like, I'd always heard of people who do stuff, but never met people who do stuff. And it was just, I was in awe meeting him. That was so awesome. But anyhow, so I reflected on 10 years and thought when we started off, we wrote a position paper. Jan did. I think I saw him here somewhere. And we said, look, this is what we need. And we started off with a meeting with press and politicians and basically said, in Spengergasse, you were there, and I think we were all kind of there more or less, saying, this is what we need. And fuck me, it's the same stuff we're asking for still today. It was like Investmentfreibetrag, 100,000 euros, Mitarbeiterbeteiligung, don't know if the English word right now, all that crap where I'm going like, we as an ecosystem have developed really well. But, and I also said, like, if this were an event in the US, in France, in Germany, if this were France, we'd probably have Macron coming along and saying, bonjour, and giving us all amazing medals and stuff, and saying, I love you very much, and give us kisses, and we'd be in the Champs-Élysées and do fantastic stuff. And yeah, I don't see any politicians here taking particular interest in them.
But isn't this also nice?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not that I particularly like them, because, you know, we always have to look at the clock, who is actually acting minister currently. You never know in Austria. But the point being is, you would think if we want to grow outside of our ecosystem, and for me, like, the thing with startups is a lot of people on the outside think startups is a bunch of dudes and occasional girls who make a shit ton of money overnight and buy Lambos. But the reality is we are the SMEs of tomorrow, right? We are the companies of tomorrow, and we are the ones who are going to pay taxes and make sure that we have public school system and whatnot. And I have the feeling that it would be kind of good to have some sort of outside interest, which I don't see. I mean, we were close to it a couple of years ago, but so close, but so far. But I have the feeling 10 years in, there's a couple picture ops, but other than that, yeah, here we are. Bring in the medals.
Yeah, we're not going to bring in medals, sorry.
Come on.
I mean, obviously, it's cool that we do not need to have political support in order to get that far. So let's phrase it in a positive way. But imagine where we could be if the points in this position paper and this Positionspapier would have been realized, because that's not rocket science. We're not, now I wanted to say demanding, we're not recommending something that is complete rocket science or that is out of this world or that is super difficult to implement. Almost every other country in Europe has some kind of startup initiative that is supported from the very, very top of politics. And in Austria, we always have these conversations, and I think Markus and I can really talk a lot about this, but I already gave up trying to help politicians to make good choices when it comes to startups.
Why?
That was the other question that you noted up front, right?
Oh, that's the one I always have.
Actually, indeed, for the reason because we need to focus on the fund. Because running a venture capital fund is fortunately or unfortunately not a hobby, but it actually requires quite some work because you're regulated by authorities. So it's a lot of work that is going into this. And we made the commitment that we're going to do this full time and not do anything else on the side. But, now here comes my but. If I would have the feeling that we're close to actually changing something from a political perspective, I would have probably stayed longer, to be very honest, because I'm a very political person. Not connected to any political party, though, which is very important for me to mention, because I do not believe in the setup right now. And we really tried. I think we worked day and night, and when COVID came up, we wrote these recommendations on what to do, and there was a small success with one of the initiatives that came up, but it's also very tiring. And I feel that my energy, my time and passion is invested better when I work on the fund or on female founders and do something on my own where I can actually change something and where I can have direct influence. So that's the short answer.
Macht schon Schnuckelhase.
Yes, I haven't given up yet, but at the same time, I also believe it's important to be independent from political decision makers, because in the end, they are reliant on voters, and voters can be swayed, and populism is out there. So I wouldn't count on politics. At the same time, I believe we did make baby steps forward. For example, with the red, white, red card, there's also some stuff happening right now. Let's see. What I learned, and I completely relate to you, the amount of effort it needs to make these baby steps, it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, what we did, like also in the early days, we were going all over the place and pitching. And actually, I mean, I remember being there, and actually, from the bottom of my heart, I was convinced all it would take, I was thinking like a founder, was getting into the room with the one decision maker, Chancellor, pitching him what we needed, and I was expecting boom. And I mean, we can talk about it, maybe now it's a couple of years ago. You know, the advisory board thing I mentioned?
But come on, we can now complain for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes about ESOPs and all things. The truth for me, when I think about politics these days, I think about something completely different. What I think about is that maybe in 1 year Austria will turn into Hungary, and we have a much, much bigger problem for the Austrian startup ecosystem. And I think that's personally what I want to that's where I want to make an impact and get at this group here. I mean, we should all become political and not make this happen. Let this happen.
Yes.
And that will make a much bigger impact, whether we have the best ESOP in the world or not. So let's do that.
So you're saying Lisa should become a candidate for chancellor?
No.
She would be great in politics. And Markus.
You're not the thanks. You're not the first person who's saying this, actually. Yeah, but fund is a commitment.
Yeah, okay, I heard
it's
that.
A commitment for a couple of years. Plus, there's also next fund generations to come. But let's see, 10 for 50 years from now.
But here's the thing. I mean, you said it early on, and all jokes aside, we did our part with the politics, and they're great, and lovely pictures we took. And if there's someone who wants to make a change, we're open. However, we've also understood that founders live in uncertainty, and founders have learned to live with what they have and not complain. And that's something I find interesting, to give this slot and ourselves also a look forward, right? And I think we all have that one common belief in entrepreneurship, right? Do you want to say it? Not say it?
Yes.
Yes, say it. Come on, say it.
I mean, what we are really convinced of, the big problems of our time, climate crisis, pension gap, energy independence, health system, those things will not be solved by politicians, simply because of the current environment.
Amen.
It will need entrepreneurs to tackle these crises.
He means you, by the way, no pressure. And so we say, okay, that if we really want to change things in the world, we need the means of entrepreneurship. And for that, we also understand we need to build something stronger, more resilient to support this type of entrepreneurship in Austria, not being reliant on politics. So what we should maybe also do is look forward a little bit and understand what needs to happen, how do things need to come into place to make founders a little bit more stronger with things you see coming down the path in the next couple of months and or years. If you were to found now, what would you focus on? What are things you'd want to see in a company?
When you look at what we are investing at the moment, it's actually fascinating. You could argue we just raised a 500 million impact fund. At the end of the day, 1/3 of our deals are climate, another probably 20% are health. We have a lot of topics around education. We have a lot of topics around financial inclusion in Africa and in emerging markets. So topics that maybe 10, 15 years would have classified as social investing are now done by very, very serious entrepreneurs that want to build something really scalable, global, and tackle these problems. And that's the most satisfying thing I've personally witnessed, because we're really at the point where we are having in front of us, and we can actually make a difference, and not just complaining about politics, but actually seeing how this is happening. And it's very, very positive. And I think those are the founders that are now have extreme privilege, because they don't have to launch an app. They don't have to create a very uninteresting marketplace. They can do something really, really meaningful. So it's a privilege to be a founder these days.
You know, I love what you just said, because a couple of years ago at the Austrian Angel Investors Association, it was one of our biggest goals to support people in making good investment decisions, not only based on return on investment, but also based on what is really creating purpose and what is really creating impact. And back then, impact was like, it means you're donating money, you're losing money, it's NGO business. And now seeing that this is becoming an integral part of a lot of investment decisions in funds, at business angels, family office, etc., is just amazing. And it's cool that impact is not a bucket anymore, like something that you would do as a fun thing on the side, but it's just such an important thing. And personally, I think that companies without a purpose, they won't be around in 5 years from now. And they won't get funding, luckily.
So there's your headline, your newspapers, impact is eating the startup world. What I would be interested in, what's the difference between starting an app and doing something really impactful from a founder's perspective? How is it a different challenge?
At the end of the day, often it is an app. That's true. But it doesn't matter if it's an app, if it's an API, whatever. It's a question, what kind of problem are you solving? And is this a real problem, or is this a nice to have that at the end of the day nobody cares about? And you can do wonderful apps that actually create solve really big problems. And that's what everybody is now focused on. You see the the serial entrepreneurs that maybe did a neobank a few years ago, or even we just had the two founders of one of those 15-minute delivery services that went up multi-billion and then went nowhere. They are now doing a massive health startup. Why? Because it's cool. Yeah. So, and I think that's a signal where this whole industry is going. It's a good thing.
I'm just so curious. Is my microphone picking up now? Thank you very much. I'm just so curious about, the battery is out. Who would have known? I'm just so curious, just listening to this whole thing, it seems...
Maybe it's you, Danny.
We'll try that one. Yeah, it's probably someone who says, no, shut him off. It seems like the things in our societies that are wrong are being solved by founders, and there's just so much to it. And it just seems the old thing we always see, if there is a problem, as you said, relevant enough, it will be solved. But that means for me also that probably a lot of major institutions that have always been considered to be there are probably going to go apeshit in the next couple of years. What's your view on that? I mean, is if we look at education, so many startups are coming up in education. That means that space is broken, right? So many areas in health tech, right? That means that space has to be broken. If we look at aging societies, that space is broken. So that means, however, that there's many public institutions that'll sooner or later become irrelevant. Am I seeing it that way? Or not? I'm curious.
I don't think it's going to be an either or. I think what the world has learned in the last 30 years is that innovation only happens through smaller entities that have the chance to iterate very, very fast. And then you take these experiments that actually work and scale it into these large organizations. NHS in the UK or the Austrian health system will not go away. But they will not innovate. They will never innovate, and by now they accept that they will not innovate. Now the only thing missing is that they understand they need to collaborate, buy, acquire, whatever, with startups, with smaller ecosystems, with smaller entities. And that is a very, very known, so to say, cycle already in a couple of countries, not so much in Europe, but it will happen. There's no other way. So I think it will be a very, very close collaboration and very fruitful.
Are these companies ready to collaborate?
Depends on the company, probably. But I think the pressure is on from all sides. From the customer side, because they will be requiring innovative services. It's on from the shareholder side, from the investor side, also from the governmental perspective, and also from media and the public in general. So I think there's going to be even more pressure on these super big institutions to be more innovative, to be more up to date. Plus, there's also new generations coming up that are digital first, Gen Z and everything that's coming beyond, and they will demand this. So there won't be a way around collaborating with startups and hopefully buying them as well.
I mean, one of our fastest growing class of investors in the fund are mid-sized manufacturing companies in Germany, Austria, France, etc. By now, these are owned by the original founders. They understand that by now, and they are investing in funds, they're investing in startups. So and that was not the case 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So there's a very clear shift that they understand that they can't do it themselves anymore. That's done. So now the next wave of larger companies will follow it. But it should have happened 10 years ago, or 20, but whatever.
Do we have the pace to build these European rocket ships, just out of interest?
From my perspective, yeah. But something that I would ask for, like everyone who is listening here today, or also like on the podcast, so I think what we can definitely improve is the speed of interacting with each other, and especially of supporting each other, because I feel that in Austria, and I know this is already different for the people who are in the startup ecosystem, but in general, are very jealous of each other. So Neidkultur is something that is very Austrian, and I think we should not see how this person can be in competition with us or how this can be difficult for us and but how it can actually help us to be even more successful, because I truly believe that when other people that I support get successful, they will give something back. So this paying forward mindset is something that we can definitely adopt even more in Austria, and something that I would really, really wish for.
You seem so thoughtful over there. What's going on in your mind?
I mean, it's a discussion that is about the future of Europe. I've got to be thoughtful, but I mean, in the end, what I would still be interested to hear, because we're coming to the end of our time here on stage, before we get to the usual moonshots and predictions, I would like to ask you, is there something, because we're talking about the state of startups, is there something we are missing in this broad public discussion? Something that you see different, something that you see contrarian here?
Personally, I feel that, I mean, now I know that it's a buzzword, but it's unfortunately or fortunately a buzzword that is actually really happening. So if we don't very, very, very quickly get very, very serious about AI and playing a part in this, I think that's one of the biggest risks I see. There are very few players in Europe that really are playing at par, at the level of excellence like their US peers. That's the next massive, massive wave of innovation, massive wave of wealth generation. And I'm a bit fearful that we're really losing ground here. I can see that, for example, in the UK, where we're investing a lot in deep tech, they are there, they can compete. There is excellence at the universities. I see very little activity in Austria, and I wonder why, and I really would encourage to take this a bit more seriously.
Whom are you encouraging here? The universities or the people?
Founders, and not just put AI on the deck, but actually work on it.
Yeah, and probably also have an answer to the question that every VC will be asking these days, which is like, is AI gonna affect your company and your business model? And if the answer is no, you're probably not a great founder.
I mean, the thing is, yeah, totally with you on that. I'm just so curious, before we get to the moonshots and predictions, I mean, the whole AI thing right now, I have the feeling it's so incredibly overwhelming for a lot of people. And I have that one feeling, there's that one word I keep hearing, I'm so curious about your opinion about that. What I hear in universities emerge, that's the word of ethical AI, where I have the feeling I see deep inhaling here, I'm curious. Because as a European, I would say, this is maybe a space where we could, for once, okay, we're not. He's going like, no,
I mean, I don't know how much. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to a lot of podcasts about AI and the ethical questions and the explainability, all these questions. All these podcasts are from the US. There is not a good discussion in Europe on these topics. There's a discussion about regulation, very uninteresting. There's a more interesting discussion about regulation of AI in the US going on. So we need to step up this game. And to think that we can win this by regulating, I doubt that it will work.
Dumb question, I'm curious. How do we build a global product in Europe without it needing to be regulated? Is that possible?
No, but regulation in AI will happen everywhere. It will happen in the US, it will happen in Europe. But to have an educated discussion around that, you also need very, very educated AI experts and great founders and big companies that are doing it. Putting this in theory, in a policy framework, will not drive this discussion forward. And that's what I see in Europe, where we have very philosophical discussions around it, while in the US you have OpenAI, Google, Microsoft fighting with the US government, how they're actually doing it. That's real.
You know, I think we had this discussion of, can Europe be the ethical hub for X, Y, Z for the past 10 years? So I think that's basically the same story as we've been discussing in the past hour. I think, and this is something that annoys me big times, because when I see potential, I try to make something out of it. And I see that we would have had the potential to become the ethical hub for X, Y, Z, but we're never doing it. And this is something that is very frustrating. And I also don't see, agreeing to Oliver, how this should be the case for AI, to be very honest. But I'm an optimist, per definition, I guess, as a VC. So I hope that at one point this is going to turn around, and that we have smart people also going into politics and making smart decisions and smart regulations.
And maybe one glimmer of hope, if you look to the US, the people that are actually on the forefront of AI, 2/3 of them are European. So there are a lot of European talent actually educated in Europe, moved to the US. So there's a thing that we could do there. Of course, not in Austria. Who cares? But in Europe, yeah.
Brother, did you just say at Austrian Startups 10 years event, like, don't start a company in Austria, no one cares?
No, no. I think trying to be, yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Well, that's inspiring to have you. I'm always so glad to have you. No, just jokes
My
aside.
pleasure.
No, I love that you're so clear-cut. Now, Markus, how do we save that?
We save it with moonshots and predictions.
I think so as well. But I am still curious, however, if you talk to founders and they say, look, where should we start our companies? When is it right to stay here? When is it right to start the company here?
I think Austria is a great choice to start a company. Obviously, it could be easier in other countries, it could be cheaper, it could be faster, but overall, we are okay. We could be better, as mentioned. Yeah, but
Just as inspiring as him. Well,
we are okay. Yeah, I mean, look at the statistics. We are basically, in all the statistics that you have, look at like in the bottom third of where we could be. So when you look at rankings, we're not very well positioned, but it's also not terrible. I mean, we are in the heart of Europe, we have great connections everywhere, but I think something that is the USP, and now I sound like a politician, and it sucks a bit, I have to admit. But anyway, we have a great quality of life, and as Oliver already said in the beginning, it's cheap to hire talent. So when you actually combine those factors, Austria is a great place to start a company. It's small, you get connected easily, you can talk to people like Oliver at an event like this, get money from him, get money from us. So, I mean, this is what we're good at.
Yeah, he brought a bucket of money, I saw it backstage. Just over there, yeah, great. It's at the bottom of the rainbow, right?
It's under the bridge.
Under the bridge, good man. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting discussion we had. I'm so curious. What are we going to say at 15 years, looking back? What went really well?
Like 5 years from now?
Yes.
I think this entire location is going to be super crowded. We're going to have even more people investing in companies, because I think money is also a big game changer, because the people with money get to decide who is going to build the next unicorns. I think we're going to have more unicorns. And I think we're still going to complain about politics, because this is not going to change 100% unless people like us step into this kind of positions. Markus, maybe for you. No, but seriously, I think the ecosystem is going to thrive. And especially, as already discussed, the founders that are humble, that are really keen on building something, that have the ambition, they're going to be successful. And I think we're going to be better positioned in the next couple of years. Optimist talking.
The one thing we really should put an end to is this whole question, should I start a company in Austria? It's total BS. Of course you should start a company in Austria, of course.
There you
go. If you think whether you should move, because maybe in Berlin it's better, maybe in the US it's better, then you shouldn't start at all. It's complete BS. Do it here, do it fast, find the right people and move on. Don't think about these things. It's completely fine. You have money here, you have talent here, you have capital here. There's no excuse to be not successful here, so just do it.
I like that. And now is our biggest challenge for the two of you. Don't kill people there, back there. It sounds quite serious. That you form a prediction and a moonshot. And a prediction could be from anywhere, but that's something where you say, this will totally happen. And a moonshot, where you say, this is something that's very, very unlikely, it's very hard, but by saying it, it becomes a bit of reality. Yeah, no pressure there. I heard it, by the way, while the two of them are thinking, Markus, I heard something really funny recently. Someone compared Berlin and Vienna. And they said, in Berlin, things are serious, but not hopeless. In Vienna, things are hopeless, but not serious. I kind of quite like that approach. A very smart person. But I like the way, the humor, and the vibe people have. And you're still thinking you need more time? Good.
I think I'm good to go. So prediction is something that is very likely, right?
Yes.
So I think we're going to see a unicorn co-founded by a diverse team. So having at least one female co-founder will be coming up in Austria in the next 5 years. So that's my prediction.
Love it.
The moonshot is also looking at 5 years from now. Vienna is going to be in the top 5 startup hubs in Europe.
I like that. Your turn.
That's what I wanted to say. That's not fair. Yeah, prediction is very, I think we will have a wave of scale-ups in Vienna that will put us on the heat map in Europe for all VCs in the world to come to Vienna and make this one of the most interesting, dynamic cities for startups in Europe for sure. That's my prediction. I'm very, very certain about this. We have all the ingredients. It's going to happen. The moonshot is that that Vienna becomes a deep tech hub with all the talent, all the excellence we have at the universities. We finally bring this together with our entrepreneurial talent and make this happen. That would be a big moonshot for me.
I like that. Do you like it? You happy?
I'm happy.
That was, by the way, episode 270. Have we been recording? Do you know?
Yes, we were recording.
Oh, thank God.
I checked with the team.
The last time we did a live podcast, we didn't record. But it was kind of intentional, but it sucked, right?
Yeah, well, it's always about creating FOMO, but here we sold so many tickets already that it wasn't necessary anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in that sense, so good to have the two of you here. Always good. It's so good to have a podcast with an audience. It kind of feels like a lot of fun. A bit uncomfortable here. It's kind of more comfortable back home, but we can work on that in 5 years. And in that sense, pleasure talking to you. Good to see you live in picture as well, because normally we just see each other via like a call and have no idea how he actually looks. And no, seriously, it was like during COVID, we didn't see each other for like 1.5 years or stuff. So in that sense, that was a pleasure. So good to see you. And any last words from you?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And Maggie.
Happy birthday.